Hi, this is Angie Carpenter, Town of Islip Supervisor, welcoming you to this edition of Supervisor Spotlight. We're here in the studios of Long Island News Radio at Long Island MacArthur Airport, and we're just delighted today to have our special guest, Lieutenant Stu Cameron, Chief. I said lieutenant.
That's where we met.
When I first met, right, he was lieutenant. But now is chief of the department of the Suffolk County Police Department, probably one of the largest departments in the country, yes?
Correct, yes. I think we're the 11th largest municipal department in the country.
Well, that would qualify for being one of the largest.
Yes. Yeah. Especially when there's 18,000 police departments in the country.
Are there that many?
Yes.
Wow. Yeah. So I have a feeling just from this brief start that we're going to get a lot of good information and a lot of statistics that we might not have known. So I appreciate hearing that. I'd like to know, though, we met about 20 years ago. We were just figuring it out when I was a county legislator and part of the Fire Island Law Enforcement and Safety Council, FileSec, which is still around and still meeting every month, year-round. And Stu was part of the Special Patrol, the helicopters that are there for us in our county, and that they were part of that group and still are, because all the issues of the beach are kind of unique, and bringing all the players together was a great exercise for me, especially as a county legislator, getting to meet Marine Bureau and Special Patrol and New York State DEC and Fire Island ferries and the police and everybody involved in the issues of the beach. But tell me, how long have you been part of the police department, and did you start in Suffolk County?
I started my career in Suffolk County on February 25th, 1985, and as a matter of fact, last month, if you do the math, it was 34 years on the 25th of last month. So it's been an actual wonderful career.
Did you always want to be a police officer?
From my very earliest memories, from when I was 3 years old, I wanted to be a police officer. I remember as a very small child having one of those wooden puzzles with the border of a police officer, and I would put it together.
Oh, that is so
repeatedly.
Cool. That is. So did you go to the academy right after high school, or?
I took back when I wanted to be a police officer at high school. I would have taken a job at a high school if I could. It was a difficult time where it was difficult to become a police officer. There were some hiring restrictions, so I took almost every civil service test that I could. I grew up in Nassau County. I was kind of aspired to be a Nassau County police officer, but Suffolk hired me first. And
Aren't we lucky?
I've never looked back. It's a great department, and it's such an honor to be the chief.
It really is a great department and a lot of history. Whenever Police Week every May, and you go out for the ceremony at police headquarters, and you see the vintage cars there and the small but very effective police museum. There is such a sense of history in the department, and it's 50 plus years now. 59
years.
59. So next year is your 60th.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, we're starting to plan for the 60th anniversary. As a matter of fact.
That's exciting. So the police department, for those who may not be aware, serves the entire county, but the police district is just the 5 western towns, correct?
People may not notice on the tax bills that there's two police taxes. One is for the, as you say, for the entire county, and those are services like aviation, homicide. We do supply those services for the entire county.
To the East End, right.
Then the more traditional policing, like when you call 911 and a police car shows up at your house, that's the police district, and that's the 5 western towns primarily.
So back in 60? Was it 1960 when the referendum?
I think the referendum was in 1959. The police department started operation on January 1st, 1960.
So back in 59, there was a vote taken, a referendum countywide, whether or not because prior to that, all the towns had their own police departments, whether or not to opt into the Suffolk County Police Department.
Right, and five towns opted in, and several villages opted in, and the 5 other towns opted not to join. You had to be contiguous. So, once Riverhead and Southampton didn't come in, it kind of precluded the other towns from joining the police district, even if they had wanted to.
Yeah. I wonder if they, at any point in time, wanted to opt in, would there have to be a referendum? How would that work?
My understanding is they would just have to express a desire to opt in, and they could do so. It's still in the county charter that they're allowed to opt in, but again, they have to be contiguous to the police district. So
right. So
it's really Riverhead
would kind of. So if there appears to have been a little bit of a break in our conversation, I want to share what happened, because to me it exemplifies once a police officer, always a police officer. And even though he's chief of the department, we are here in the studios at the airport, and there was a kind of a thud on the glass door of the studio, and we turned and looked, and a woman had fallen. So Stu Cameron, being the dedicated officer that he is, leapt and went to make sure she was okay. And she is.
Yes. Yeah. Well, as it says on my patch, it says police, and I'm still a police officer. So if something happens in front of me, I still do what I have to do. And I enjoy it. I do.
Yeah. Well, and our public safety people at the airport too were there, and she is okay. She just kind of tripped or twisted her ankle or something. But I've been in those situations. You trip, you fall, you jump up because you're embarrassed more than anything else. But thank goodness she's okay.
Yeah, I'm sure when they told her to have a nice trip, that's not what they meant.
Yeah, very good, very good. And you see, in addition to having all of this information at his fingertips, he's very quick-witted, our chief of department. So anyway, you have always wanted to be a police officer. You've been in Suffolk County 35 years now. And what precinct did you start with?
I started out in the 2nd precinct. I graduated from the academy, and they put me in the 2nd precinct, which, if you're not familiar, is the town of Huntington. Mm-hmm. And I worked there. I worked in a sector car for a number of years, and I worked in a traffic enforcement car. Then I went into plainclothes, and then I made sergeant and left the precinct.
Hearing you talk about being in a sector car and everything else that you did reminds me of my experience having attended the Suffolk County Citizens Police Academy. And that is still going, is it not?
Yes, yes.
And that is an incredible opportunity for people in the community to really get a sense of what the Suffolk County Police Department and policing is really all about.
I couldn't agree more. It's a scaled-down version of the same type of academy that we put our police officers through, and we put members of the public through, so they get a great appreciation of what it's like to be a police officer. And
that's been going on now, I'm going to say probably 25 years, if not more.
I'm not certain exactly how long, but I would agree that it's been going on for quite some time.
Because it's been a number of years since I did it, and I'm pretty sure it was going on for a number of years before. But like the chief said, you actually go through a mini academy, if you will, and laws of arrest. And I remember going in a sector car, going to where the 9/11 calls come in, and seeing that whole operation and understanding how important it is when they're asking you the questions, why they're asking you the questions. But,
my experience is that people that may have been even slightly critical of the police department beforehand, the reason is they don't have an appreciation of how difficult this job is. And they really, as you saw firsthand, you really get an appreciation of how rewarding but how difficult and challenging it is to be a police officer.
Well, I'll give you an example for me personally. When we were going through the role playing, and I'm the police officer, and you're in a situation where somebody comes upon you and you've got to make that split-second decision on whether or not to draw your weapon or not. And I can remember very clearly having the instructor say, well, you would have been dead, because I hesitated. And the thought that went through my mind was, well, I don't want to be accused of, police brutality, and you can't hesitate. If you think your life's at risk, you've got to.
Absolutely. And I tell the cops, the police officers that work for me all the time, the really, really important critical life or death decisions don't get made by me in headquarters. They get made by you out in the street. Mm-hmm. And as you saw going through that scenario, you really don't have a lot of time to make the decision. So the way we overcome that is we try to hire the very best quality candidates and give them the very best training.
And it is a very intensive training. Having been to many police graduations and seeing the filming that they do during the academy time, it really hammers that point home loud and clear. Well, we'll be back in a few moments to hear more from the chief of the Suffolk County Police Department, Stu Cameron. Welcome back to Supervisor Spotlight. This is Angie, Carpenter, Supervisor of the town of Islip, and we're here at the studios of Long Island News Radio today at our wonderful airport with the Chief of the Suffolk County Police Department, Stu Cameron. So we were talking a little bit earlier about what got him interested in policing, and it was from an early age, 3. That's pretty early, and has been with the department 35 years. And so in that time, you've got to have seen a tremendous change in policing in some respects. In some respects, the community aspect of it and being approachable and having people not be afraid to approach you has got to be the same. But I know when I was in the legislature, we made the decision to put mobile data terminals in the police cars, in the sector cars, and that seemed to be so, cutting edge at the time. This was, I guess, in the 90s.
It was actually, we put our first mobile data computers in the car in 2000, and we're in the process now of replacing them for the 3rd time. This will be our 4th version of mobile data computers. They last about 5 or 6 years because they're on virtually 24/7, and they're out in extremes of temperatures. The newest version of the mobile data computers, it's an interesting dynamic now because myself and the other command staff are very interested in technology. We're all big technology supporters. So we get very involved in this generation of the mobile data computer. And one thing we really wanted to do is free the police officers from the car. Every one of the previous 3 generations were locked into the car, and if you wanted to use a computer, you had to stay in the car. The 4th generation now is a tablet that's removable, that's fully functional outside the car.
Oh, that's
great. So it really frees the officers from the cars, and they can go into people's houses and sit down with them and prepare the reports right in the houses, and I think it's a much better dynamic.
Oh, wow, that really does make sense. So you're in the process now of making those replacements?
Yes, it's a 3-year phased capital project, which I'm sure you'll appreciate from your time in the legislature. By spacing it out over 3 years, it makes it a little more affordable for the taxpayers. And one of the things we're able to do, because we went to a tablet computer, we're using a cellular air cord, so it's just basically like a large smartphone. We put the cellular air cord back into the mobile data computer, the tablet, so we can leverage that for voice over IP service. So one of the issues that the department faces is the language barriers, primarily with the Spanish-speaking community. So we've been utilizing, since the 90s, a service called Language Line. So we're able to call Language Line and get a Spanish translator on the phone. Now they can do that with the tablet computers anywhere they can take them.
So it goes with them. That's great.
Yeah, so it's a really exciting tool, and it's a tool that I think we're going to be able to leverage and put more and more technology on it going forward.
Do you know offhand how many sector cars there are?
There's 133 sectors in the Suffolk County Police Department, but we have over 400 marked cars. And in cars, I say cars loosely because a lot of our cars now are what would traditionally have been called SUVs. As a matter of fact, Ford is discontinuing, believe it or not, manufacturing of the traditional police car.
Right.
And they're going to go to the utility interceptor, which looks a lot like the civilian version of the Ford Explorer.
So okay. I was thinking the Escape, but the Explorer, it's a little bit bigger.
So that's what the public is going to see going forward. That's the police car.
We're starting to see a little bit of it now.
Yes.
And I would imagine that it really will be more effective for them. Your line of sight is better, in a raised vehicle than it is in a sedan.
I agree. There's a lot of advantages to going to that platform. I think it's going to be good going forward, and I think primarily many law enforcement agencies realize that, and the bulk of the sales that Ford was seeing was that platform. So that's why I decided to discontinue the car.
Tell me about community-oriented policing. I know the COPE units were really big. When I was in the legislature, I can remember the COPE guys on their bikes, and I always felt it was a great tool to really bring the police officer closer to the community and make them feel more approachable.
That's one of the things I've definitely seen transition during the course of my career. When I started, there was some community policing, but it's nowhere near as robust it is now. As you cite, we started the community policing, the COPE units. We have a community relations bureau that works out of headquarters. But the biggest transition that I really see is the adoption of community policing by all of our police officers. I think that's happening more and more. They're engaged with the community, and really what we're looking to be is part of the community, not someone in the community, but a part of the community. Because that's really the way it should be. We should model the priorities for the police department based on what the public wants, because that's who we serve.
And if you are entrenched in the community, you're really going to get the meaningful feedback that you need so that you are addressing the community's needs.
Right, and I mean, there's that whole police legitimacy issue that people need to think that we're treating them fairly. If you call the police and you don't think we're going to treat you fairly, and we're not going to be able to resolve the situation, they're not going to call us anymore, and they're going to try to resolve situations on their own, which in many cases may result in violence. Yes.
Right, right.
Yeah.
There are a lot of programs, I think, from what I'm hearing or reading, that the department is adopting that might not have been there 5 years ago, 10 years ago.
Absolutely.
Do you want to share some of that?
As you may realize that we signed a settlement agreement with the Department of Justice. You know, and many people may see that as a negative. I personally saw that as a positive.
Mm-hmm.
The Department of Justice was able to come in, and we needed to make some changes. It was pretty clear. That was like having a free outside expert come in and advise us on things that we should do to make the department better. And as a result of that, I think we really have made the department better. Things like our language assistance plan. I believe somewhere around 20% of the population in the county is Spanish speaking.
Well, here in the town of Islip, the largest concentration of the Hispanic community is in the town of Islip. Outside this city of New York, New York City, Islip town is home to the largest population in the entire state of New York.
So we need to serve them. They're part of the community too. We need to serve them adequately. So we test officers now. When we give the entrance exam, the last 2 entrance exams and the upcoming one, there's a separate list for Spanish-speaking police officers, and 10% of every one of our recruit classes has been a Spanish-speaking person. So we're definitely increasing the number of organic Spanish-speaking people on the police department. Then, as a result of the settlement agreement with the Department of Justice, we test the people for 2 standards. One is bilingual officer, which is someone that can handle a call in Spanish one-on-one or any language that they're fluent in. And then there's department authorized interpreters who are able to come to a scene and translate. And that obviously is a much more difficult skill because they had to listen to something in one language, translate it in their head, and speak it out in another language. So that with language line, of course, I've been studying Spanish myself for 10 months.
Well, I've heard the chief speak, and you do quite well.
I'm trying, and I've progressed to the point where I can't imagine just 10 months ago that I'd be able to get to this point, but it's just a matter of carving out the time to do it. And one of the ways I've been able to be successful in that is I do spend a lot of time in my car. So rather than listening to the radio, no offense to the radio station here, I spend the time learning Spanish while I'm driving around.
What program are you using? Because this is on my bucket list.
I'm using a couple of programs. I started out with a cellular-based app called Duolingo, which is, I think, one of the number one learning applications. But I realized that would probably be too slow to reach the goals that I had set for myself. So then I bought another program called Pro Spanish. And the upside to that is they give it to you in several formats, including MP3, which I'm able to play through the radio in my car.
Oh, that's great.
So I can play the lessons over and over again until I master, and then I move on to the next lesson.
Great.
So it's pretty rewarding. I mean, I did go and did my first public speaking engagement with the congregation at St. Anne's, and it was really a wonderful experience. The Mass was absolutely beautiful.
That's a wonderful parish. It really is. I was just there the other night.
It truly is. It was such a beautiful Mass. And they were kind enough to let me get up and say something briefly in Spanish to the congregation because it was a Spanish Mass. And I could see them light up when I was able to speak to them. And I can't tell you how rewarding it was for all the amount of effort that I put in to see their reaction.
Well, I applaud you for that. And hopefully you've inspired me to be a little bit more proactive in going down that road. I was at, Stu mentioned St. Anne's. I was there the other night. They had a spaghetti dinner, the Boy Scout troop did, and there were hundreds of people there. And the pastor of the church came down and was talking to the kids, and it was interesting because he's Polish.
Yes.
In a very Hispanic community, but does a really, really fine job.
My understanding is fluent in English, Polish, and Spanish.
Yeah, he's incredible.
Which is
Father
pretty
Stan.
amazing. Yeah, Father Stan's great. Yeah.
So we will be back in a few moments with Stu Cameron, the chief of the Suffolk County Police Department, to learn more about the doings of the wonderful department, which is the 11th largest in the country.
Yes. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. Hi, this is Angie Carpenter, supervisor from the wonderful town of Islip, here at our Supervisor Spotlight with the Chief of the Suffolk County Police Department, Stu Cameron. And we were talking earlier about technology and how it has changed the whole complexion of policing, certainly not just in Suffolk County, but across the country. And one of the things that was just in the paper recently, online reporting, and perhaps you can tell us a little bit about that.
Sure, absolutely. When I became chief of the department, we reinstituted something that we'd had in the past called TelServe, which if you call up for a fairly minor thing, we have police officers that are able to take the report over the phone for you. But we just recently launched an enhancement to that, which allows the public to report crimes via their computer. And there's as talking about language, there's an English and a Spanish version of it. So for certain categories of low-level crimes, or non-criminal events, you can log on to our website and type them in yourself. They'll go to the same police officers that take the calls over the telephone. They'll review them. If they need any additional information, they'll email or call you. They'll complete the report, and then they'll email you a PDF copy. So I think the great application for many people is the non-criminal events where you simply need a police report number to process the insurance claim.
Well, that really makes a lot of sense. So I would imagine you're talking, a couple of days rather than in the old days you were driving a Yaphank or to the precinct to pick up a copy of a police report and you had to wait until a copy could be made, et cetera.
And I think Amazon kind of highlights the fact that the younger generation really likes to do things online. It's more convenient. They can do it when they want. Some of the lower level calls, if we're busy, it may take us a while to get a police officer to your house, so it may inconvenience you that you're waiting for the police officer.
Right.
This makes it very convenient. It's very easy to do. So I think it's going to be a great addition to our efforts to take reports.
Well, there's no question about it. People have certainly embraced technology, and we see that, in town government. And I liken it back to when I first got involved in government. When I walked into the legislative office, we didn't even have a computer. The copier was a old-fashioned, you put the paper down, you put the lid down, you hit the button, and you made one copy, and you had to turn it over. And, it was kind of a shock to me coming from the graphic arts industry, where I had all of that technology at my fingertips. But it took a while for the county to get there and get computers, et cetera. But certainly now, where in the past people would call with a complaint or an issue, or they would write a letter, now you're getting emails constantly and text messages 24/7, so that when someone thinks of something, it doesn't matter if it's the middle of the night, they get out their iPad or they sit at their computer and they're sending you, the information, and it's good, but in another way it makes it a little difficult because they've sent you this complaint Friday night at midnight, but you might not be in the office until Monday downloading those emails, so you've already lost a couple of days.
Yeah, that is a concern. We had something like a text-to-tip or something like that. Something like that for the police department, we have to really monitor that 24/7. So we have to find some command that's working that can look at that in case someone sends us something that's urgent,
right?
Such as a school threat the next day or something like that. We can't allow that to sit all weekend.
And that's why, in the town, our dispatch is 24/7. So if there is a pressing issue, we want people to call so that we can dispatch somebody immediately and not wait until someone's there to read an email.
Yeah, funny you mentioned the technology. When I first went to Special Patrol in 1999, we had to replace a helicopter. So I was dealing with, at the time was American Eurocopter in Texas, and they asked me for my email address. They said, we're going to have to deal back and forth in email. And it was before the county had email. At least I didn't have email.
Yeah.
So I had to buy my own a phone modem. I had to put a phone modem in the computer and sign up for an email account and plug it into a phone. And the phone jack that I used happened to be a phone that was in the adjacent office. I just had to have a phone jack. And every time that person picked up the phone in their office, they'd knock me offline.
Oh, gosh, that's so funny.
Yeah, it's funny. The way technology has advanced is incredible.
Well, hearing that story reminds me of when I was working before government in my business, which was graphic arts. We had an account that did labels for all kinds of packaging, bottles, jars, whatever. And we would set the type for these labels. So now if he had a change on something, we would have to go pick up the change, or they'd call over the phone if it was nothing,
Yes.
too extensive, and finally said, I really need you to have a fax machine. And I'm like, a fax machine? Oh my God, that's going to cost like $2,000. I can remember it like it was yesterday. But he said, well, if you don't have a fax machine, we're going to have to go to someone who does. So we really had no choice but to invest in this fax machine. And the first couple of days that we were getting faxes, I can remember you heard the phone ring. It had a little bit of a different ring. And people would go, oh my gosh, it's a fax. And everybody would be going over to the fax machine. And look, it was really incredible when you think about it. And now, everyone walking around with a camera, a video camera, it's so different.
That's definitely one of the things that we're seeing in law enforcement too. Technology, when I was a young cop, you'd get a new patrol car, the car would be new, but all the technology in it would be exactly the same.
Right.
The radio would be the same, the light bar would be the same. Now technology, just like in the public and law enforcement, is advancing so rapidly. It's hard to keep up with it, and that's definitely a consideration when you buy technology. Do I want to invest a lot of money in this? Because this is a product may be obsolete very quickly.
Well, it's like as soon as you purchase it, it seems like it's almost obsolete.
It does, but eventually you have to pull the trigger and buy something. No pun intended.
Yep,
and
yep.
You do have to try and keep up with it, and you have to research it and make sure that you're spending the limited resources you have as wisely as you can to get the biggest bang for your buck.
Yeah, and resources are limited. It is difficult. People are very cognizant in this era of transparency and information out there for the public. They want to know that their tax dollars are being spent wisely. And then we function under a state mandated tax cap.
Yes.
So and people too are struggling, and we know that it's a high tax area. So you've got to be very cognizant of that. So spending every penny wisely is so important.
I've spent a lot of time during my career sitting in legislative meetings.
Yes,
back
I
to when
can
you were
remember seeing you there.
And I've listened to the debates, and I really know how challenging it is with the limited amount of resources. What do you fund, and what don't you fund?
Right, and
especially during the
more
budget
and more
meetings.
difficult.
It is.
It is more and more difficult.
That's a job that I don't envy, and it's not something I would ever aspire to have.
Yeah,
but thank goodness we have great people to make those really difficult decisions.
Yeah, well, they are tough decisions sometimes. But one of the other things I wanted to touch on before we're going to have to end is the fact that I find Suffolk County Police Department, from my very early beginnings, even before I became involved in government, I was involved in the chamber. If we wanted to have someone from the department come to do a program for our businesses about being secure and safe and not being a victim of crime, they would send an officer to a meeting. There's always been this willingness on the part of the department to partner not just with other law enforcement agencies, which they do so beautifully now, but with community groups. And I really, my hat's off to you for doing that, and you really have taken that, I think, under your tenure to the next level.
Thank you. And one of the things I tell the public all the time, technology is great, but really the backbone of our department is the people. I have such wonderful people working for me, both sworn and civilian, and that's what makes our Suffolk County Police Department as good as it is.
And I think, too, with our commissioner, Geraldine Hart, she really comes across as a people person, and it puts that approachable face on the department.
Yes. Yeah, when I was a young cop and you come in, not that I did anything wrong, you just tried to naturally avoid the bosses. I think the bosses in our department are much more approachable than they've ever been in the history of the department, which I think is good. I think it's very good.
Well, I aspire to that. As a supervisor of the town, I don't ever want anyone to feel I'm one of the bosses, that the door's always open, and it's really a partnership. It really is a partnership. So your team at the department, my team in the town, everyone's got to pull together and work together, and that's what makes it work.
Exactly, and I love talking to people that work for me, because that's where I get a lot of good ideas.
Absolutely. And they have to feel comfortable coming to you with them. But even more important, coming to you with the good ideas, if they think you're doing something that's not so good, that they're comfortable in telling you that, because that's really important.
That's probably more important. Yeah.
So with that, we're going to end. I can't thank you enough, Stu. This has been a really quick half hour.
My pleasure.
Stu Cameron, Chief of the Department, Suffolk County Police Department, and I am Angie Carpenter, thanking you for listening and watching.